Hello, welcome back. We are still up to here in essays, can't really think about anything else, so we're going to talk about another thing that I'm writing an essay about, because that's nice and easy for me. What we're chatting about today is the Wages for Housework campaign, which was part of the sort of 1970s feminist movement. I'm writing a kind of bigger essay about feminist theory and applying it to literary texts, but I'm just going to focus in on this little bit of it for you today. So the Wages for Housework movement was kind of spearheaded by a lot of Italian feminists. So Selma James, Silvia Federici and Mariposa Della Costa were sort of the three big names, but it was much broader than that. It was very much an international movement with a lot of voices within it. The core argument of this movement was that domestic labour is labour that has gone unrecognised, it's been hidden, it's been dismissed, and this labour is so associated with women. Society has almost naturalised this work to the role of the woman or the female, and it's been essentialised. So domestic work is essentialised as love. We don't actually see the work behind it. It also tried to politicise the private sphere through this. These are all big feminist statements that may not make sense, so I'll unpack them a little bit now to explain what that actually means. So naturalised as female means that basically, because over the years and years and years, women have always been the people who've done the housework, we've lost sight of the ability to see that this is a decision that we just decided to make. We decided to impose it on women, and we now see it as sort of a natural thing. Like it's naturally associated with women because women have some sort of difference that allows them to do housework, whereas men can't, which obviously is not true. And the second bit is essentialised as love. So what does that mean? Essentialised as love means that women have, like, we are told that women do domestic work and take care of a household because it's how they express love. It's an expression of love. And the fact that we attribute it to love and essentialise it to love means that we're actually erasing all of the work and the labour that goes on behind that, which may not actually be that woman's choice and is not recognised within the statement that, oh, women love to take care of the household. And finally, the politicisation of the private sphere. So the private sphere is this idea of things that aren't seen by the public, they aren't in the public eye, so whatever goes on in a house is private. And there's an association of the private sphere with women traditionally. Men are the ones in public places who are seen, who are visible, and women take care of the home. But also within the private sphere, it also means that this is not inspected. It's not, we don't look at the structures behind it, we don't look at equality within it because we disregard it. Whereas the work that feminists did a lot in the 1970s, which is why it's so associated with the personal is political, is they tried to politicise this sphere. So they said that no, there are structures that operate within the sphere that affect our lives and shape the choices that we have available, and these structures can be changed and are moulded by society, and it is society's job to equalise them and to make sure that we have opportunities and that we aren't exploited or abused or oppressed within the sphere. So that's kind of the big ideas of wages for housework, the big key ideas that have come out of it. They also stem from Marxist feminism. So this is the idea that all of women's oppression stems on and is built upon a capitalist framework. So capitalism is the framework that comes first, and the women have oppressed nature in this because we take on roles such as mother or housewife that are oppressive roles that we have been taught that we have to take because it allows the capitalist system to function. So by having wives and mothers, it means that male workers can work to their best ability. They are optimised because they don't have to take care of themselves because women do it for free. Wages for Housework was a campaign to challenge all of this. They said, this is how the world operates now, but we want it to be different. And the demand that they had was that women should be paid for housework. In fact, anyone should be paid for domestic work that they do. The idea of this was that it would challenge what domestic work was and how it was viewed, and it would also give them access to rights that workers' rights domestic workers don't have access to when they aren't being paid. It would allow them to unionise and demand better working conditions. As I mentioned, it was a very international and very diverse movement. It kind of brought together a lot of groups that we often see separated within when we talk about second wave feminism, it brought together, there was black feminist groups, there was lesbian feminist groups, it was a very international movement. That's kind of pretty unique at the time. However, it was criticised by loads of people, especially criticised by black feminists. So the Brixton's Black Women's Group criticised them a lot in England, and in America, a kind of very international and very well-known criticism is that of Angela Davis, who wrote a chapter unpicking this movement and problematising it. Some of the criticisms that they posited were that it doesn't, like, Wages for Housework fails to take into account the fact that mostly black women have been working as domestic workers for years and being paid for it, and that has not improved their working conditions and has not stopped them from having to do that domestic work. They argue that, like, the domestic work in itself is so mind-numbingly boring and so draining, it's not being paid for it won't help that, but also being paid for it won't improve its status in society, it won't improve the position of those people, especially if they are black women. So maybe also levelling a sort of white middle class feminist critique of this, saying that it will mainly benefit white middle class people anyway. Another big criticism was that this doesn't really challenge the role of the woman as the domestic. So by assuming that that is given, assuming that women are doing the domestic work and therefore should be paid for it, is different to saying we don't want to do the domestic work, women should not have to be responsible for this. And I think depending on which bit of Wages for Housework you read, it does come across differently, but this is certainly something that would be an issue, especially if we were to say, like, take Wages for Housework into today. We're not actually deconstructing the role of the housewife or domestic worker and saying this is not okay as an identity, when it actually assumes that that is okay and then just goes, but if people are going to do that, then they might as well get money for it. It also, in that way, doesn't challenge any capitalist baseline. It doesn't try and dismantle this oppressive system. It just goes, oh, well, if we exist within this oppressive system, maybe by giving people more material gain for it, they'll be slightly less oppressed, which is not particularly revolutionary and has definitely been accused of being a reformist position. It's obviously really complicated, and especially with Wages for Housework, because it was such an international and diverse movement, there are so many different voices within it, that I definitely think certain parts of the movement challenged a lot of the critiques that are placed against it. And I also think there's a really good bit of writing that Silvia Federici has done that kind of challenged these ideas and said it's not the point is the political frame of analysis that they are using. So the kind of ideas they're using to unpack how domestic work is seen and what that means is the real crux of the movement, and is actually what we can take forward to today and those political tools of analysis of what we use. Whereas the actual demand for wages is not the point, even though it was the point. It's complicated. That is what Wages for Housework was. It's a very, very brief overview. I mean, it's not particularly relevant today. It's relevant today in terms of the political analysis and the history of it, but it's not a demand that's being made. But it's useful to have that context when thinking about how we talk about domestic work today and how we talk about the role of the housewife. It's all good and interesting. I'm gonna run back to my essays, but hopefully that was good fun.